Hi, and welcome to the Anxiety Relief Revolution. My name is Dan Candell. I am your anxiety relief guy, and you may be wondering or may have thought before, wow, the people around me, they are still in the same place they've been, and they look at me whenever I grow or whenever I try and achieve better things in my life, and they look at me almost like I'm doing something wrong. Can that interfere with my progress to move forward in anything that I do in life? And guess what? You better believe it can, Cupcake. Sometimes when we're trying to make changes, whether it be to overcome anxiety, whether it be to change a habit, whether it be to eat healthy, get in shape, or even go to the gym, there are people around us where if they don't have the behaviors or the habits that are congruent to where we want to go, guess what happens? Boom! Resistance. And oftentimes, people like the broken version of us. They like the person that we were. And if we start making changes, they look at us almost like, what's wrong with you? Or what got into you? Or like, what's going on with you, right? And it's not always in a good way. They don't always mean it in a really good, comfy way, right? So can other people's perceptions of you or of the you that you've been, can that impede your progress from moving forward? Absolutely, it can. I was working with several clients over the past couple of weeks who shared this phenomenon with me, actually. And they said, whenever I get anxious and, I get really uncomfortable and I tell my spouse, like, oh, I'm not feeling good, I feel anxious. My spouse says, oh, you're so cute, and oh, I love it when you're like this, you're so vulnerable. And of course, that person didn't mean it like, I want you to be sick always. I want you to feel like poop all the time, right? They didn't mean it by that. That was just them being compassionate, but that can sometimes be a little bit of a blip in the system of us getting the help that we need to get. And I see this a lot in work culture too. A lot of the people that I work with are business professionals, they're executives, they're some of them even are entrepreneurs. And I want to tell you a few examples of this. One is an entrepreneur who has always struggled with anxiety and always being like firm in his business. And the people that worked for him, he had a team of about 15 people that worked for him. And this team of people knew his deficiency in his ability to stand up for himself. So this would cause them to walk all over him, use him as a doormat, and he just felt used and abused. He felt used and abused. But those people that he brought into his work culture, they loved that about him. They're like, oh, he's just an easygoing guy, right? He doesn't care. He goes with the flow. That's what their perception was. But on the inside, he was burning with resentment. He was burning with betrayal. He felt betrayed by these people. And I asked him, I said, what boundaries have you set? He's like, what do you mean boundaries? I'm like, what? Boundaries. What boundaries have you set? What fences have you put up that these people have crossed? And he was like, I haven't put up any fences. I haven't really put up any boundaries. I said, well, are there consequences? And he's like, no, I feel bad because these people have been used to me being a pushover and they've been used to me being Mr. Nice Guy. And it was causing this whole world of turmoil for him and his business. His business stopped growing because he wasn't able to be assertive enough. And if you hear anything, my dog just came in and is shaking his collar around and is stepping on the wood floor and trying to find the perfect place to sleep. And he has a squeaky toy with him. So good boy, Cooper. So if you hear anything in the background, it's just Cooper. Cooper is, from the time I'm filming this, he's about, let's see here, about 16 months old. So he's still got a lot of puppy in him. So he's a golden retriever. He's a white golden retriever. I think they call him like Old English. Anyway, let's get back. Okay, squirrel. So that was causing him a lot of turmoil because he was allowing people to treat him like that. And he was afraid to do anything different because he didn't want them to look at him as being a jerk or being an asshole. So guess what happened? I too use some ways to give him confidence and give him assertiveness. And the second he went back into work, and the second he started implementing boundaries and consequences, guess what happened? The people that worked for him started saying things like, "What's wrong with you? This isn't the person we know. This isn't the kind and compassionate person that we agreed to work for." And they started threatening to overthrowing him. So here's how we negotiate this. When you walk into a situation and you go from Mr. Nice Guy or the nice person to instantly assertive and dominant, it's going to cause a lot of resistance. So what we have to do first is we have to communicate with people around us and say, "Hey, I'm going to be making some changes, and I need to make things work a little bit better. So I'm just going to start making some changes, and I'm going to be implementing some other guidelines." If you're in the corporate world and you know KPIs, I'm going to start putting in some KPIs and some trackers, and I'm going to be trying this for about 2 months, and I really need everybody to raise the bar with me. I need everybody to step up to the plate. I need all tides to rise. And if we don't meet these numbers, or if this doesn't happen, or if what's been happening keeps happening, then there are going to have to be consequences. And when you go in and you explain things like that, and granted, you don't owe anybody an explanation, and this person, he didn't owe anybody an explanation. Okay, Cooper, yep, I know you're playing with your squeaky toy. He didn't owe anybody an explanation. However, his business relied on these people working for him. And I also told him, in the background, why don't you start building or fishing for some other team members, just in case these people don't work out, who are used to and who are going to be used to these boundaries that you're setting. They're going to fill out these KPI trackers. They'll follow your SOPs, your standard operating procedures. So we were able to form a little bit of a crisis plan as well. But let's talk about this also in a little bit more of a personal way. People, when you start growing, people around you, whether it be spouses, whether it be family members, whether it be friends, they are going to sometimes not be very supportive of that growth. And they're going to say things like, "I don't know who you are anymore. You've changed so much. I don't like this person." And this happens sometimes. This happens. Think of it. Think about this. If you are in a routine with your spouse where every night after you eat dinner, you lay on the couch and you veg out for 3 hours until you go to bed, and then you make a decision, you say, "I don't want to do this anymore. Instead of vegging out on the couch for 3 hours, I'm going to go to the gym for 2 hours, and then I'll veg out with you for an hour." And that person may look at you and may say, "Who are you doing this for?" They may challenge you, and they may come at you with resistance. And again, oftentimes just having a discussion, "I'm doing this for me, so I don't feel like a lump on the log." Or even when you're moving out of anxiety and moving more into confidence, you've got to understand you're going to come up with resistance, and there are going to be people who don't like you standing up for yourself. There are going to be people who want you just to stay right where you are, stuck in that little anxious shell. And one of the ways to really combat this is to ask yourself, when I make these changes, what am I willing to lose? And what am I willing to gain? And guess what? I had a client where it worked out, and because they made some changes, the relationship that they were in for 6 years didn't work out anymore. Because you know what? That other person was not supportive or congruent with the growth that this person was making. So this can happen, and sometimes we gotta set boundaries, sometimes it can be conversations, and sometimes we just gotta let people go. And when we let them go, though, we're not just letting them go for us, we're also letting them go for them. Because, yeah, they're right. You are growing, and you have grown, and you're probably not the best fit for that person anymore, because there's going to be conflict, there's going to be resistance, and either you are willing to work that out or you're not. So again, a question that you can ask yourself, and this is one that I ask a lot of my clients: When you make these changes, what are you willing to gain? And also, what are you willing to lose? And are you willing to meet up and to confront some of the conflict or some of the chaos that might be stirred up as a result of you making some of these changes? And this is what happens. A lot of people come into me from seeing therapists where I'll say more old school therapy or motivational speakers or life coaches where they more tap you on the head and say everything's going to be okay. I'm not saying all coaches and all therapists do that. A lot of motivational speakers do. They tap you on the head. They say everything's going to be okay when you make these changes. Everything's going to be perfect. And when you leave here, you're going to be farting butterflies, rainbows, and unicorns all day, right? No. So just be aware that when you're making changes, whether it be overcoming anxiety, whether it be stepping into your own confidence, boundaries, creating more boundaries, there are going to be people who don't like that version of you. They don't like the version of you you're building. They fell in love with the old version of you. And I'm going to go out on a limb to say that broken version of you, even though I'm not a fan of saying broken, I don't ever believe anybody is broken, for lack of better words, I guess we'll say. People fall in love with the old version of you. And if you don't grow together, or if they're not supportive with your growth, and again, I'm not just talking about spouses and partners and family, I'm talking about acquaintances, I'm talking about friends. For example, perfect example, smokers. Guess who some smokers hang out with? Other people who smoke. And when people no longer smoke, you're not going to want to hang out with those other smokers because that's what your identity has become about them, right? That's what your relationships have become about. You don't want to hang out with those other smokers, and guess what? Those other smokers probably aren't going to want to hang out with you because you represent what they can't do. You represent what they can't do. The same thing is true where if you start making all these healthy changes in your life and you start hanging around and you keep hanging around with people that are going to pound down pizza and French fries and ice cream every single day, 3 times a day, you're not going to want to hang out with those people. Guess what? They're not going to want to hang out with you either because you represent what they couldn't do or what they can't do or what they're not willing to do. And on a subconscious level, they're going to feel judged by you. So just keep in mind, whenever you're making any changes, you have to discover that it's not always going to be 100% butterflies, rainbows, and unicorns that bursting from the inside out, right? Sometimes there is going to be conflict, there's going to be resistance, there's going to be a little chaos. And I know people in my generation, most of us, and the millennial generation, I hate talking about generational stuff, but it's a big topic. We don't like conflict, we don't like chaos, right? And especially if you are a victim of trauma, you most certainly don't like conflict and chaos, but you create a lot of it internally, don't you? Yeah. So it's not really going to be that bad because it's actually what we're used to, right? People who've gone through trauma, we're used to conflict and chaos, and we're used to keeping the peace. And the thing is, we don't go around creating conflict and chaos. We want to be peacemakers, yet we're used to it. So why not get used to it in a way that serves you? With that said, my friends, I know this was a little bit of a difficult message to hear, yet it's one we all need to hear and we all need to take away from this message of it's okay for you to set boundaries. It's okay for you to stand to lose something if you're going to be gaining more in the future. With that said, my friends, if this message resonated with you, let me know by leaving a comment or a rating. If you haven't followed me on YouTube at Dan Candell, Instagram at Dan Candell, or TikTok, Anxiety Relief Guy, what are you waiting for? And if you haven't rate and subscribed the podcast Anxiety Relief Revolution, go ahead and do that now. And if you really do need help, if you're struggling with something and you'd like help from me or my team, reach out. You can go to dancandell.com and there are some options and resources there for you. As always, my friends, be well, do good, be true to who you are, and happy healing.